Hey there, folks. I'm Hils Walton, and you're tuned into the Digital Culture Ideas podcast and YouTube show. And today I'm really excited because I've got such a powerhouse guest. Sarah Carney is Microsoft Australia and New Zealand's National Chief Technology Officer. We'll get into what that's all about in a minute. But Sarah's got this incredible knack for seeing what's coming before anyone else does. And she's all about steering Microsoft's big league clients with their clear vision and a solid moral compass. So her smarts and responsible AI means she's not just diving headfirst into new tech, but we're doing it with our eyes wide open and making sure that all the cool is on the front foot with ethics. Plus, her time in the military and her globe-trotting adventures, well, they've given her the edge in coming up with fresh, game-changing ideas. And trust me, when it comes to building a tech future, we all want to be part of Sarah's the ace you need in your corner. So I'm really thrilled to have Sarah as my guest. She has a fascinating background, and as you're going to find out all about, and I'm looking forward to her perspective on the role of technology in our society. So hi, Sarah. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello, and thank you for having me. What an intro. It's always awkward sitting through those. Thank you.
Well, it's all true, and I am super excited to have you on the show. So thank you for saying yes. But before we sort of dive into, your current role and your projects, I'd just love to hear more about your journey to becoming a technology leader. Because you started your career in the Australian Army, and then you worked in various industries and countries. So how did these experiences shape your interest and passion for tech?
Yeah, I suppose I've always been interested in technology and devices in any form. I was always trying to get my hands on the latest phone or camera or laptop. But I grew up in an era where we didn't talk about technology as a career. And when I started at university, it wasn't a thing. And so because I'd done physics and maths and chemistry at school, I signed up for an engineering degree because apparently that's what
As
you
you
do
do,
next.
yeah.
Right? And I think it's probably that engineering mindset that actually led me through all of those industries you talked about and to technology, because I love knowing how things work. I want to know the why of everything. Like, what is the motivation? What sits behind it? What was the reason for it? And I can get so deeply engrossed in pretty much any subject area at all. And so although I kind of dabbled around the edges, I'd never really had an appreciation of technology as a career. And I was just really fortunate that I worked with somebody who moved to Microsoft, and she's like, you have to come and work here. I'm like, I don't know. I'm happy where I am. And it was really funny sitting in the foyer of the office waiting for my interview. And I was like, oh no, this is cool. I want to work here. So I think all of those industries and all of that background really helped me find this bridge, this way of translating all these complex technology ideas that I now get to sit with into business relevant concepts.
That's really interesting. And so, if we're thinking about your role at Microsoft, so National Technology Officer, tell us about that, because that's not really a term that people use outside of Microsoft necessarily. So pull it apart for us.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting role because it can be anything to anyone at any time. And so at the moment, obviously, the big focus is helping our customers understand this moment of artificial intelligence. What does it actually mean? What can they do with it? What are the challenges they're going to face in stepping into it? But 18 months ago, it was the metaverse. And so it's this wonderful, ever-changing, evolving role and opportunity, like our industry, where I get to talk about anything that's coming up and trying to find ways of making that applicable to different industries. Because I'm a big fan. You've heard me say it many times, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I want to find what that real use case is. Like, the metaverse is amazing. I love it. In fact, I'm sitting here with my little goggles next to me.
Nice.
But that doesn't mean that everybody wants to be there, and it doesn't mean that there's a business use case for it. And so it's just, this role is like helping find balance and helping guide customers through that, and helping them overcome the hurdles so they can embrace whatever comes next.
So that sounds pretty challenging. What have been some of the key challenges that you're facing in your role, or that perhaps your customers are?
Yeah, I think often, I feel like the biggest challenge is that there's never enough time to know the customers and their industries as deeply as I would like. But it's probably our own industry as well. Technology moves so quickly, and there are so many participants entering and exiting. It can just be overwhelming trying to keep up with everything. And I think you could drive yourself crazy with that. And there's also this sense that people are looking to you and expecting that you know something about everything, which can be really hard to reconcile for people like ourselves who do want to know something about everything. So I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges I find in this role is I do want to know everything about everything, and you just can't.
Well, it sounds like you're infinitely curious though as well. So I think that probably helps in your role and as you're dealing with customers. Now, I know one of the key responsibilities that you do have is your involvement in responsible AI. And obviously that's a really important topic for our listeners. It's probably one of the things that I'm speaking about most at conferences and in webinars. You know, how do we implement AI responsibly and govern it as well? But you're actually the responsible AI lead for Microsoft in Australia and New Zealand, and you're on the regional AI product red team, which is pretty cool. I'm dying to find out how you got into doing it. But before we do that, can you explain what responsible AI and red teaming mean and why they're essential for developing and deploying AI solutions?
Yeah, so how long have you got? But these are some of my favorite topics as well. And I genuinely feel like responsible AI is one of the biggest enablers for wide scale AI adoption. Like we all want to feel like someone has thought about what the implications of deploying a new system or tool might be. And that's fundamentally what responsible AI is all about, helping individuals and organizations stop and think about the AI programs that they are building, deploying, and using. And we at Microsoft, of course, have a framework that helps us think about a number of different angles around all of our programs. When any engineering team that's building a product has to go through this very rigorous process. And we think about, is it fair? Can people access these tools without fear of exclusion? Is there bias in the system? Is it secure? How reliable is it? And there are so many lenses you can bring to your responsible AI. But the key is, of course, having some kind of framework. But of course, frameworks are great, but you have to do something with it. So I'm like, have a set of principles, that's really good, but please apply them. Otherwise, there's no point. And so for us, that's where red teaming comes in. So when you think about testing a new system, what most organizations test is to make sure the system does what they expect it to do. That doesn't meet your use cases or the various personas that you've created. Whereas red teaming is almost to try and do the opposite of that. So a red team traditionally associated with cyber, but we do red teaming on all of our products. It's a group of people whose goal it is to try and break the system. And so when it comes to AI, we dedicate a lot of time to different aspects of red teaming. So of course we test it from a security aspect, but we also test, and that's what these local teams do, a range of scenarios such as illegal activity, self-harm, violence, sexual content, bullying, political and worldviews. And so what we're trying to do is expose potential risks that we will then mitigate before that product is released. And I think what most people don't realize is that we do it globally. So we're trying to bring in language and cultural nuances to that testing, so that it is truly local. And the example I often use is in Australia, we had a referendum last year on The Voice, and we didn't want Copilot to have an opinion on that. So no place for Copilot to have an opinion on that. And so as a red team, we spent a lot of time coming up with the ways in which people refer to Indigenous cultures and the kind of questions that they may ask the system so that it would not be able to respond to those things. And so, of course, that all comes back to that responsibility piece. We all want access to amazing time-saving tools, but we also need to know that they're as safe as they can be.
I think you're right. I think when people think of red teaming, they absolutely cybersecurity, and probably more often than not think of like hacking something like technically with technical tools. But actually, this type of red teaming, someone doesn't necessarily have to be deeply technical, and it's about, not cracking a system necessarily that way, but it could be just through prompting, right? So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Anyone could almost be a red teamer as long as they were just curious and, could, keep coming at the system and trying to sneak around it. So that's kind of a new career that maybe a lot of people haven't thought about that they could actually be really good at.
Such a good point. And it's one of those things that I often talk to people about this. When you're using these publicly available tools, there's a thumbs up and thumbs down response. Like, use those. Help the systems be better. If you hated that response, tell them why. Because that is effectively red teaming. You're trying to help build a better product for everybody. So I love it. Yes, definitely red teaming.
When I talk to people about what they can do first to get involved with AI, even if they're just, even if they're working in an ordinary kind of non-tech organization. I sort of say, well, talk to the technology team who might be implementing different AI within the organization and give them feedback on what's working, what's not. And this is an excellent way for someone to do that, right? Talk to the technology team, be part of the internal red team, a group of, people who are kind of trusted to try and break the system. But if they do, they're going to give feedback and so that they can actually make it better.
Yeah, I mean, we have a comprehensive program that we put around it where we support those people, because the kind of imagery you can be exposed to can be quite confronting. But you don't have to go that far. It can just be as simple as writing a series of prompts and seeing what the system does and providing that as a report back. So yeah, it's definitely a huge opportunity for organizations, and they should be, because that's the thing with these tools, right, is you don't know what's in your own data. Like, we test it before we deploy it to you, but what's in your own data? What could it be surfacing when it taps into your ecosystem? And so definitely, red teaming internally at different organizations should be a thing.
That's awesome. So you obviously speak to a lot of different customers around implementing AI, across Australia and New Zealand. So you've seen organisations doing this, that have been sort of actually early adopters and using the tools. Based on what you've seen and what you know about AI and what you've done with customers, can you think about, like, if you were just tasked with implementing AI into an ordinary type of organisation, what would you do? And let's say you had to do it in 6 months. What would you do kind of at 1 month, 1, 2, 3, or kind of whatever works? I'm really keen to understand what you think the key steps are for organizations.
Okay. I feel like that's $1 million question, isn't it?
And it's a big question. I'm sorry. Yes.
And it's such a great one. And I think the challenge is every organization is different. It will depend on their AI maturity. So let's assume we're starting from ground zero with nothing in place. And I've probably changed my thinking around this based on what I'm seeing over, across all of those customers you're talking about. So if you'd asked me 12 months ago, my answer probably would have been different. But the first thing I think that people are really missing, and we should start with, is education for everyone. If we want our projects to be successful, we need this level of AI literacy across entire organizations. And I see so many companies leaving this until last, and I get why. They want to build the system or deploy something and then train people to use it. But what I see emerging is this adaptation stress or change fatigue. People are tired of having to learn new things. So I'd start with education, and I think you'll remember how we did it as well. Like, we didn't start with a specific tool. We started with that sort of gamification of it, where before we deployed Copilot to everyone at Microsoft, we had this series of 4 weekly challenges or fun tasks where people learn how to use AI without realizing that they were using generative AI. And so we were like, go and write a poem, or create an image, or write a prompt and share it. And so what it created was this common language and understanding across, the thousands of people we have before they even needed it for the new tool. So for me, it feels like that lift then is so much smaller when you do roll out a new tool. So for me, the first thing is education. The second one that I've seen completely change organizations' likelihood to have success with AI is business engagement. So often we see these things as it's a technology, so the technology team are the ones who are expected to lead it and push it out. But organizations where it's a business-led transformation are seeing much better outcomes. And I think the reason is because you find better use cases. If your business is engaged, you're finding the use cases that actually matter, as opposed to the things we feel could be important. And the second one, and this is a really important one, because of course now we have sort of 12 months of data to look back on, is it helps bridge this fear of job displacement. And job displacement is one of the biggest blockers to AI adoption. And it's really interesting because we do this Work Trends Index, and it was released a couple of weeks ago, and the stats are astonishing. Across Australia and New Zealand, 84% of knowledge workers are using generative AI at work already, which is streets ahead of the global average. Like, it's crazy. But on the flip side, they don't want to be great at it because they're worried they'll lose their jobs. So this child, which is people desperately want it, and they can see the value of it. But they don't want people or bosses to know they're using it, or they don't want to use it really, really well. right? So like this tension's emerging. And that's why I say this leader-led transformation is so important, because what bridges that is a leader-led conversation. Leaders who explain why the systems or programs are being deployed and what their expectations around the use of them are. And in fact, the best organizations I've seen are the ones where they're being really explicit about where they expect their people to spend their newly freed up time, so that people then have this confidence in using the system to the fullest. So leader-led transformation is my second piece. So let's say that's month one.
Yep, perfect.
I want all the things. I want to do everything in month one. This is terrible.
Of course, yeah. Well, you've only got 6 months, so.
You'll be really busy in month one. I think, and then the two pieces that probably go together, data governance and AI strategy. Like nothing happens if your data's not good. So you need to know what you have, where it is, and who owns it, and what concerns do you have about it, and then have some kind of AI strategy. So it doesn't have to be overly complex. I think people think AI strategy and they're like, oh, am I going to do this? It's just how will systems be tested? Who will manage them? What frameworks are you going to use? What are the checks and balances? What are the guardrails? So there you go. That's month one. Okay, now I have to think about month two. Okay, month two is use cases. I touched on it before.
Yes.
I think use cases is the really big thing. And again, I see people struggling with this because it is really exciting and everyone comes up with loads of ideas.
Yep.
But unless you map them out and you think about what are the barriers to doing this and where will we actually see value, you're going to pick the wrong place to start. So I think you need to get all those great ideas from all those business leaders that you've now engaged as part of your program, but then map them out and find the right use case to start with. And hand in hand with that is the soapbox I love to stand on, return on investment.
Absolutely.
Right? How many customers have you had where this is a thing where they're like, you know what, we deployed generative AI systems and we forgot to measure it, and now we don't know how to measure success in this.
Sorry, I am just getting
look at that.
Interview. That's awesome, Lily.
Spectacular art.
Remember how I said I was doing a recording? Can I sign out with your phone? Oh, yeah, there you go. Sorry, Sarah.
You're good. All right. Okay, and hand in hand with that, for me, is return on investment. And I know you and I have talked about this with so many customers where they've deployed things like Copilot and they forgot to think about how they were going to measure success.
Measures. Yep. And then they're trying to get more money to keep the initiative going, and they're like, oh, we should have actually measured something earlier so that we could tell how it's changed. Yeah,
exactly. And it's so hard to do retrospectively. So absolutely, while you're doing those use cases, how are you going to measure success? And AI is hard because you have to think about the hard measures, like did we make more money, did we make more things, all those sort of things, but also the soft measures. Like, are our employees happier? Are they more engaged? Have we reduced turnover? Are people learning more things? Like, there are so many different ways you can measure the softer side of things. How productive are they being? But that's the complexity with AI and these generative AI technologies, is how do you bring those two pieces together? So that's sort of month one and two. And then I'm a big fan of just getting in and doing it. So I feel like you have a play and do something and iterate, refine, and deploy. Like, it just, that's the piece where I think people get stuck, is with all of those things, you should have a great ground, you know, all the grounding's done, the framework is done, and you should be able to start playing with those things. I know there is this sense of wanting to do one thing at a time in terms of one use case at a time. But again, I'm finding organizations where they do maybe 3 at a time are actually finding it easier because they're learning across all of them, they're iterating across all of them, and therefore getting to value faster.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it's just interesting that you can really quickly learn and refine and iterate and keep going on that. And so doing one often means you've lost all that learning by the time you try and do the next one. And so it's how do you do it all really rapidly, which isn't necessarily a muscle that a lot of organizations have. So finding either that capability internally or finding someone to partner with to help you do that, I think is really important.
Okay, so you're at month.
I missed Hils. Like, come on. No, that's all of it. I'm done. Those are all the months. Just keep doing that.
Oh, and then over and over again. Yeah.
But what else did we miss? Change management is a really big thing that you'd want to think about. And I touched on that a little bit. Like, I see people not doing that. So I feel like the change management pace is really valuable, and you've got to think about that.
So the change management thing is really interesting, I think, because if an organization starts kind of too small, then they might not put resources into like actually having someone manage the change, or, a project manager, and may not put as much time into the adoption pieces. So they might, which all happens after the tech's being created, that it's actually people using the tech, which is super important. And because with AI, it's more of a personal choice. Sometimes you can just revert back to your old ways.
Yes.
They're not seeing the same impact if they're not thinking about that adoption piece. And it's hard. Change is hard. People have to lean in, do some study, kind of work out how something works or doesn't work, and then practice and practice and practice. And I'm finding that is definitely getting underrated.
Yeah, and I think I was a cynic as well. Again, we rewind 12 months or so. I was like, are you kidding me? How hard is it? You just tell it what you want. But I now appreciate there is this art to actually getting the system to do what you want. And we have to remember that our workforce is diverse, and lots of people haven't had to be directive and tell systems or people what to do. And so that is a muscle that they need to build. So as I said, I started off as a bit of a cynic around, like, seriously, the system just teaches you what you need to do, but actually it doesn't. And so change is really important. And the piece I often see missed is that feedback piece we were talking about before, the thumbs up, thumbs down, like making sure it's really easy for your people to give you feedback on the system so that they can tell you if it's working or not. And you'll know, like, adoption will drop off really quickly, but you'd like to know why. So
Absolutely. Now, kind of along those lines, I know that while you deal with customers around technology, you're often sort of seen speaking around kind of culture and, people change and innovation and things like that as well. And maybe it's because you've got this super diverse background in terms of, you've been involved in think tanks, you're a ballerina at once, like you've got this really diverse perspective on life. But when you think about fostering that culture of innovation and creativity in teams, like what's some of the best practice tips that you share with people that might be quite useful for our listeners?
Yeah, look, and I mean, it's a big conversation at the moment, right? Which is, what are the skills that will last into the future? Well, we've got AI that can do everything. What is the thing that makes us fundamentally human that we need? And so I often talk about creativity as one of those skills, alongside critical thinking. And I think we forget that creativity is actually a skill that you can learn and hone, just like anything else. And I see so many people writing themselves off. I can't draw, and I love, right? Like, it's human nature. Like, we spend our entire childhood producing endless pictures and craft, endless amounts of this. And then suddenly we just stop and we become, right? And we become really practical, and we just stop doing those things that don't serve a clear educational or business purpose. And so I love to try and challenge myself and people in my teams to go and learn something that has no practical purpose. And so I went and learned crochet recently. There was a lot of swearing involved in any number of YouTube tutorials. So it was diabolical. I'm really not good at it. But there was no purpose to it. I didn't need to know how to do it. I wasn't trying to make something specific. It doesn't help me at work. But doing something just because is really powerful. And what it does is it opens these new neural pathways so that when you're having a business conversation, your brain is working in a completely different way. And so, to bring this back to business and not about crochet, I think there's this beautiful exercise we do where, when we're doing ideation with our customers, that shows you how this creativity and how you can build it into an organization. So we get people to draw a vase, and we just say, draw a vase. And I did this with my own leadership team a week ago, and almost without exception, everyone drew some kind of bowl, your standard glass vessel, right? Which is unsurprising. I told them to draw a vase. The second activity you do is draw a new way to enjoy flowers in your home. And the creativity that you get, because it's the same thing, you're effectively asking the same thing, but
same outcome,
right? And we had people who designed flower mats and glass walls and atriums, and there weren't two ideas that were the same in the second round. And I think that talks to that creativity, which is the first round, everyone's the same. Second round, everything was different. And then after that, we got them to think about a really big business challenge. And it just helps to shift thinking and this sense of ability to innovate in the moment you need it. Like you've shown them that they can do it, and then they actually step in and do it and apply it to a business situation. So big fan of like how you bring creativity in and how that then leads to innovation.
I love that, and I can see how that kind of just frames the meeting up for a completely different outcome after all of that creativity. Absolutely. So there is so much going on, Sarah. I mean, we've sort of, often it feels like we're flying by the seat of our pants because technology is changing so much, and the landscape is just, it's not about what's happening in 12 months, it's what's happening in 2 or 3 months. Are there any ways that you can share with the listeners around how you keep up with all the technology developments? Have you got any go-tos, or how do you stay a step or two ahead of the rest of us?
Yeah, I am so uncool. I'm a visual learner, and I'm actually very tactile as well. So books is my standard. I have to touch the thing. I still write notes on a piece of paper. But the two resources that I use, my default is normally McKinsey. They are my go-to for thought leadership around emerging trends. And I feel at the moment like they're almost reading my mind when I get their latest article blasts. I'm like, I swear I just thought about that thing. And then suddenly here it is in a thought leadership paper. And, for context, they've written 100 articles over the last 12 months on generative AI. So it shows you how quickly they're getting through, right? Like one every 3 to 4 days. It's just nuts. But they are my go-to for that sort of really forward-thinking thought leadership piece. But a new discovery of mine is a newsletter called TLDR. And they do 2 daily newsletters, one on tech in general and one on AI, and they cover anything and everything. And I cannot recommend them highly enough. I scan them every day, and they have the links to the longer articles. So they do like this 1-minute summary of everything in there, but then they have the links to the 12-minute read if you need to go deeper or anything. So yeah, head to tldr.tech to sign up for that one.
Awesome.
They are really good.
Oh, that's a great tip. Thank you very much. We'll be doing that after this podcast.
There you go.
Um, so I look around at Microsoft, and we have a lot of women who work there, which is great. I think our diversity is really fantastic, but that hasn't always been the case in the technology space. And obviously, you're a senior woman in tech. What kind of advice would you give to the next generation of female tech leaders as they're coming through? If you're thinking about,
I feel like I'm the worst example of this. I have this terrible mantra of what's the worst that could happen. I think the thing that holds us back is we second guess ourselves so often. In fact, I just got off a call with someone where this lady tells me that she's done a certification 2 years ago and she's not sure she can do it again. And I'm like, you've done it. Like, you can do this thing. I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? Go sit it again. And if you fail, you know where the gaps are. And I think we second guess ourselves and we stop ourselves from stepping into these opportunities and moments. So that would be my challenge to every woman out there, which is it can feel horrible and you may feel, you feel like you may fail at some point in time, but what's the worst that can happen? Someone says no. But if you will lose 100% of the jobs you don't apply for. So I'm like, throw your hat in the ring. What's the worst that can happen? So that's my first big piece is like, you've got to have a go. And you may end up in a situation like you and I where we're like, hey, look at this, what happened? Cool. But the other one that I'm really conscious of, and this is a big thing for me because I'm hugely competitive. I can turn anything into a bloodbath of competition. It took me a really long time to learn this. And actually, it's something that I've grown a muscle around at Microsoft particularly, which is career success is not like cake. There isn't a finite amount of it to go around, and I don't need to cut people down or step on other people in order to be hugely successful. And in fact, I can help lift others and help others be successful. And so that's a piece that I think I would love everyone to consider, which is who else can you help to be successful? Because it's not cake. There's not a finite amount of it to go around.
I do love that, and I have heard you talk about that before. That is a game changer, I think, in terms of thinking differently. That there's not just one place at the table. It's not even a table. There's many. That's the key. Yeah.
Like we're programmed to think we're programmed to think that there's only one job and there's only one opportunity. Like it's just human nature. And I like trying to switch that gear and realize that it isn't the case. And I can help other people be successful and still have success myself. So
very true. Okay, so now maybe a little bit of a personal question, which is, what are the top apps on your phone right now?
I'm so boring. I want to be cool and hip. I'm not at all. And they would have to be Copilot, and I'm not trying to just promote Microsoft. I genuinely use it all the time. I don't search for anything anymore. I don't know about you. I ask for everything I want. I don't search for anything. Signal, because I like secure messaging.
Excellent. Yes.
Or Aura, because I'm obsessed with sleep and health tracking. I'm so sad. I love looking at my stress levels throughout the day. Notes, because I cannot remember. I can't remember anything. I'm terrible, and I write so many notes. Like, people often think I'm being really rude or I'm texting. I'm like just writing a note really quickly to myself. And HelloFresh, because I have no idea what I want to eat, and I just like outsource that to somebody else. So
I hate that decision. What am I going to have for dinner?
yeah, that's somebody else's problem now.
Yeah, that's perfect. Oh, that's very cool. When you're doing your notes, are you actually typing or do you audio them?
For whatever reason, I type them. I've tried audio. I'm just not very good at it. I've been using audio a lot with Copilot, telling Copilot what I
Yes,
want
me
to type.
too.
Love
Yeah,
that. But for whatever reason, I just find with notes, it doesn't capture it, and then I get really annoyed. And I'm just like, it's just faster if I do it myself. So
yes, that's very true. What is the shortcut? Is it Windows H that brings up the microphone
I
on your
don't know.
computer?
See, you're teaching me things now.
And then, yeah, so for example, jump into Outlook, drafting up an email, Windows H, the microphone comes off. I'll speak the email. And then I'll go to Copilot to generate it, and it cleans it all up.
Nice.
It's an amazing hot tip from
Yeah.
one of our colleagues from us at work, and it's just revolutionized my the amount of emails that I can get through, because I just have to say kind of what I want, and then Copilot cleans it up. I sanitize it, and then off it goes. So good.
See, and people are
Hot
worried
tip.
about losing their jobs. Like, who doesn't want Copilot to do that for them, right? Like, who wants to triage email? Anyway.
Exactly. Okay, so we're sort of finishing up here, Sarah. What's coming up for you? What are you looking forward to? You got anything on the horizon?
Always exciting things. The thing I'm working on at the moment, which is so much fun, is I'm doing a session on the future of AI in a couple of weeks' time. And they gave me like a completely blank piece of paper. They're like, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to talk about, but tell us what's going to happen in the next decade. And I've been having so much fun.
Oh, that would be fun. Yeah.
Like thinking about what that could look like, toying with different concepts, coming up with what the jobs of the future might be. And so, it's like some of the ones I've been challenging myself with are things like human computer teaming managers, because of course we talk about AI as a member of the team. So someone's going to have to
Yes.
be an expert in how you manage that relationship and how this interaction will work. And the one I deeply hope becomes reality really soon is an online chaperone, because my parents suck at using the internet in any way, shape, or form, or understanding what's real and not real. And so this concept of an online chaperone, or almost like a reality checkpoint. So that's the fun I've been having at the moment. I was having a debate last night with someone around robotics, and we were talking about whether you should have a license for your robot and whether it should have rights as a robot. So this is like the fun things that I've been toying with for this session in a couple of weeks' time. So that's what I'm working on at the moment.
That sounds very fun. And actually, it's something we all should spend a little bit of time doing, is reflecting on what the future could look like, because we're desperately trying to predict, aren't we, what it might look like so that we can build for that future. So that sounds like an awesome session. And so finally, any messages you want to leave the audience with, or any calls to action, or before we finish up, what would you like to say?
I think we've probably touched on some of them. Like, my big one is don't lose sight of your creativity and critical thinking. Like, they are skills that we need to hone. And in this world where AI is being deployed to everything, we need to be able to stop and ask whether it's telling us the things that are true or that we believe. And so, I feel like step into it and experiment and play, but do it with that critical thinking front of mind. So you're like, does that make sense? Did that happen? So that's my only piece. And have fun. Go have fun with it.
Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Sarah. Really loved it.